You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. I'm just going to put a bow on this conversation from the super local half hour. The money that counts for free parking in Monopoly is the money paid for chance and community chest cards, the bail to get out of jail, and then the luxury tax spot. If you hit the free parking spot, you get that money back. Jerry has informed me that's not in the official rules, to which I informed him that you can find the official rules inside the box. So just remember that when you are playing Monopoly, everyone's free to play by their own rules. But I mean, there's right rules and then there's wrong rules, you know. And we got to keep that in mind as we move along here. Enough of that, though. That's gonna have me more heated than anything else that we're going to be jumping into today. There's a lot to get into and not a lot of time to do it, but I do like to focus on Wisconsin when there is an opportunity to get this state in the news. And it looks like we're dealing with a bit of transition that is absolutely unparalleled during my tenure here, and it seems as though any time in Wisconsin history since 2009. There have been a handful of announcements coming specifically from the Wisconsin GOP of either retirements or a lack of interest in running for reelection. And we'll get to the retirements at the end of this segment because that actually ties into the conversation we're going to have about Japan here in the next segment. But if you haven't heard, less than 24 hours ago, the Wisconsin State Senate leader, Devin LeMahieu, or LeMahieu, I always hit him with that strange inflection, LeMahieu, will not be seeking re-election. He's been in the Senate since 2014, has known nothing but a majority in the Senate. I believe 18 to 15 is where it sits right now, with a lot of question about what that's going to look like in the very near future here. I don't think that this is a coincidence that we are seeing these kind of announcements. 4 announcements just in the Senate alone, which, if you're bad at math, 18 minus 15 is 3. This is also going to be the first really, or I should say, real test of the ungerrymandered maps that the OGs of this show remember. We were hard pressed to go more than 40 minutes without talking about the status of the maps here. And I do feel like, at least as it stands right now, I withhold the right to change this opinion depending on how things end up playing out. But based on all accounts, based on the way people are talking about the way the maps are drawn right now, it does feel like it's a much more fair interpretation of what the people of Wisconsin want. And if you know me well, you know it's led to a bit of frustration with me that as somebody who likes to talk politics in my personal life, who looks forward to new bills passing, that looks forward to talking about the changing of the guard and new approaches to addressing problems that exist, I really have had a frustrating time trying to make statewide Wisconsin politics relevant to the conversation, because we can talk until we are blue in the face about the appropriate level of school funding. We know where it's going. We can talk about prepartum or postpartum being covered by Medicaid, and up until yesterday, it really wasn't going anywhere. And again, similar to these retirements, I think there's one very specific reason why you see bills like that passing now. It's because it's actually going to be a competitive race for the first time in 15 years. 15 years ago, no, sorry, 17 years ago, was the last time that Wisconsin had a new governor, a new Senate majority leader, and a new assembly speaker all at the same time. It was during the red wave of 2009 that basically ushered in the next 16 years worth of political rule in the state of Wisconsin that they somehow are still trying to lay at the feet of Democrats. You're really going to struggle to get me to buy into that, given the structure of the power dynamics in this state. this is not a coincidence, and I think this should be exciting for people that view themselves as Democrats, because it's looking promising. And given the trajectory that the National Republican Party is on, what with the war and the cost of living and so many other factors impacting American society, um, things are not spelling success. It's not written in stone. Anything can happen. You need to have good candidates here, but it does look like a promising start to the electoral process here. Now, just as a refresher for people that haven't been listening, when we would talk about this Assembly and Senate every single day, a lot of what the Wisconsin Democrats represent is an attitude represented by um, over 60% of the Wisconsin population. Whether you're talking about legalizing marijuana, or funding for those public schools, increased funding, that is. Or the list goes on, expanding Badger Care. We're one of 10 states that hasn't done it yet. And basically all of the other states are those Golf of Luigi states, your Arkansas, your Alabamas, your Mississippis. You don't want to be included in those lists ever. It doesn't matter what the category is. They are always never leading the pack in anything. You don't want to be included in those lists. Abortion access, fill in the blank here. More than 60% of the people reflect that. However, we have been staring borderline supermajorities for the Wisconsin GOP in the face for the last 16 years. 4 years of my life, 16 years for a lot of you listening to me right now. The fact that Devin LeMahieu has announced that he will not be seeking re-election shows to me that there is very obvious tea leaf reading going on right now. And there's a lot of people that have kind of waltzed into victory, not particularly nervous about what the outcome from the election was going to be, not nervous about the fact that 6 in 10 voters were frustrated about what decisions were ultimately being made, supporting Act 10, whatever the situation may be. They weren't nervous about the political ramifications because we were gerrymandered. And there was an effort to convince us that we weren't gerrymandered. But anybody who was buying into that, I ask you, explain to me why you're seeing all these announcements back to back to back to back, not at record numbers, but at higher numbers than have ever existed in the last decade and a half. You could chalk it up to coincidence, but you know me, I'm a deductive reasoning guy. I'm not buying coincidence here. We know what's actually happening. And the most interesting one about it to me, and I'm going to use this as a segue into the national scene here. There was one member of the Senate who is the longest serving Republican state senator out of Racine, who announced that he is retiring. It is not a matter of not seeking reelection. He is 73 years old. We're in an ageist environment, right? We're saying we need to get younger. And I'm not saying that there aren't older folks that have good ideas, but I'm saying that our elected officials are in no way representative of the average breakdown of the population. But State Senator Wangard has announced that he is retiring. He hasn't really stuck out in terms of, there's certain politicians that are loud, that get the camera on their face, that draw your ire. I walk around calling Speaker Voss Napoleon all the time for 5 or 6 different reasons, one of which does pertain to height. Which I should be better than, but Lord knows I'm not. I've been making tall jokes for far too long in my life, as one person in my YouTube chat can absolutely attest to. However, and this is going to tie in. It's going to tie into my personal life. It's going to tie into the national scene. It's going to tie into Wisconsin politics. Upon announcing his retirement on WTMJ, the Wisconsin Democratic social media team took to social media. Twitter specifically is where I saw it, but it was available anywhere. So if you're on social media, you can find it. And posted his picture with the LinkedIn banner, open for work. And if you're not on LinkedIn, you don't know. I actually just got back on LinkedIn because one friend of mine was like, you need to work on your social presence and LinkedIn counts. I was like, only squares are on LinkedIn. She was like, yeah, but squares listen to radio too. I'm like, fine. So I'm on LinkedIn now. And they did his picture, though. And this is the only reason I know this. I had no idea that this was a thing up until a moment ago. But they put a banner under there if you're looking for work that says open to work. So anybody that peruses your profile that sees that maybe you have some qualifications that match whatever they're looking for, they're like, oh, okay, this guy might be a good guy to hire. They jokingly took State Senator Juan Guard's picture and put that banner underneath it, which prompted himself as well as the entire Wisconsin GOP to cry crocodile tears. Now, don't get me wrong. Politeness should win the day, right? Like there's a certain level of civility that I feel like social media and a specific president may have taken out of the conversation, but by and large, civility should roll the day. Here's the problem with that. You do not get to LOL cry more snowflakes for the last 10 to 12 years. And then the second the joke is aimed at you, cry foul. And I can speak firsthand to this, as people tried to get me fired for calling ICE a bunch of masked virgins whose only qualification necessary for getting the job was hating brown people. That's a funny joke. I don't care who you are. If they just would have been allowed to see a girl naked, they might not have been so hateful in their lives to put on masks and do what they had been doing for the last year and some change. People got mad at me for saying that. And those same individuals think Donald Trump's comments about Japan were absolutely hilarious. You don't get to turn around and cry foul when the joke offends you and then make fun of anybody getting offended by a joke that doesn't offend you. Pick or choose. I don't care which one. For the record, I'm a first generation gamer. I am here for the jokes. I am not a joke police. I said as much on my Facebook page. There is no joke that someone's going to make that's going to make me say cancel that person. That's going to make me say that's not funny and you should take it down. There is no statement that's going to make me say that. But then you don't get to turn around and say it to other people. And when Senator Wangard is mad that someone made a LinkedIn joke about this person retiring, I'm not looking for work, I'm retiring. Where did the human decency go in politics? That went out the window when the sitting president of the United States made fun of a person with a handicap. I don't know what I said. I don't remember. You guys remember that? That went out the window that day. I know it sucks. If you want that to still exist, I feel you. I feel for you. That sucks that that's there. This person retired, and the Wisconsin GOP blocked the majority will of this state for the last 16 years. And I think a lot of people are starting to feel confident that there may be a changing of the guard in the near future. For the record, I have not necessarily bought into the idea that they're going to flip both chambers. I do think they will win statewide, regardless of which candidate ends up coming out of governor, just based on the trends that I've seen since I've been here and even trending a little bit before then. But I'm not bought into the idea that both the Senate and the Assembly are going to flip. Could happen. Not necessarily bought into it yet. But people are frustrated. And you do not get to play the comedy's legal again crowd. You don't get to be the freedom of speech warriors that you claim to be. And then the second the joke is made about somebody that you support or stand by, you immediately kick into that gear. You can't have that both ways. I don't understand why you think you can. And I just wanted to start the show there because it really does look like a changing of the guard is in the cards. And I don't know what more I can say about it other than that. But as KG out in Houston says, there's few types of people I respect less than those who can dish it but can't take it. And I totally agree. I oftentimes joke the people I grew up with in my neighborhood said some of the meanest things I've ever heard in my life to me. It's why I am the way that I am today. It doesn't bother me at all. I actually have stated 1,000 times over that there's 15% of me that is Donald Trump. You know what I mean? It's the worst 15% of me, but it exists in my body. There's stuff that he says that I'm like, like, you chuckle to yourself and you kind of hate yourself for chuckling to yourself. I'm not including the Japan thing in there. I thought that was a pretty crappy thing to do, but there's stuff that he does that gets me going, and I'll be the first one to admit that. But if you're going to dish it, you have to take it. If you're gonna appreciate what he said about Japan, then you better appreciate the fact that I think ICE are a bunch of talentless virgins that are bullies that are doing the only thing that they are qualified to do, bully people. And if that bothers you, pick a different show. Don't sit there and complain. Don't tell the manager. Like, I don't like the phrase Karen because every Karen in my life is a very nice woman, and I don't like that that name has been used to describe a certain demographic of people. But don't be that type of person that is described by that term. Like, you got to understand it. Ben says the days of decorum are over. Both sides are mean and they want you and me to die. No, I don't even go that far, Ben. I don't think anybody wants Senator Wangard to die. I think they're making a comment because, again, Democrats in the state of Wisconsin can smell blood in the water right now, metaphorical blood in the water. They know that a lot of the people running for office right now know that they were using the levers of control. They had control of the Supreme Court, who okayed the maps that blatantly made it so that Democrats never had a realistic shot of even getting close to a simple majority, let alone pushing back against a super majority. And all of that after 16 years is becoming undone. In all likelihood, Act 10 is going to get rolled back. In all likelihood, you're going to start to see certain rules providing access to abortion for people that want it, possibly a statewide effort to legalize marijuana that even a majority of Republicans are in favor of at this point. You're going to see a lot of these things that the majority of people wanted to see happen. And I think there is a frustration with the fact that it took this long to get here, mixed with an excitement when the sitting president is posting Mortal Kombat memes about war that people champion, and then they sit there and cry because somebody makes a LinkedIn joke about a 73-year-old announcing his retirement from the state senate. You can't expect people to take you seriously. And I did see one right-wing talk show host down in Milwaukee saying, all these retirements are probably going to motivate the base even more to show up. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. What was gas at when you guys were driving to work today? Brian says politeness in politics, we're way past that. In fact, I've begun to let the other side have it right between the eyes, regularly crying foul. Again, it's a happy medium. If it's in good fun, I posted a picture. I didn't post it to socials, but I've been sending it to friends of mine at work. If you weren't at the bar with us yesterday, there's a picture of a couple of the guys on SCO, and they're all holding a Packers helmet, and they all have a hand on the helmet. And I took a picture of it, and then I sent it to them, and then I followed it up with a picture of all the people with hands on Trump when they're in the religious prayer circle. But of course, Islam is the one with the crazy zealots. Don't forget that. That's a funny joke. There's no ill will in sending those two pictures for people. There's a time and a place for this kind of stuff here. There's a way to do it in a way that doesn't escalate tensions, that at the same time lets people know, like, hey, bleep these guys. And it's funny when you do it that way. This idea that everybody wants people to die, that's what the media wants you to believe, man. That's not real life. You know what everybody wants? An affordable standard of living that they recognize this president has no intention of delivering, and the previous one didn't either. That's all I'm saying. So with that, I do want to get into the national conversation here about how Trump handled that press conference, the comments about Pearl Harbor, and not necessarily from a joke perspective, but about how we are at a time right now when we need more friends than ever. And polling data shows that not only do our friends not trust us, but they trust a certain country that's going to give some of you shivers down your spine more than us, and it's trending in the wrong direction. And comments like this are only going to make it worse. By the way, we are streaming live on YouTube. Shout out to Larry, Jaro Manny, Frank Driftwood, and plenty of other people that kind of make up the community that's kind of jumped on there for the first 2 weeks. Love if you guys joined it as well. It's just at Ben Cominos. You can just type it in the search bar and hop on board, watch the show, take part in the conversation there. It's hard for me to keep up with it because you guys keep it rolling on there, but I absolutely love that you guys are into it. We do have to get to break, and we will jump into that on the other side. So stay right where you are, and we'll be back. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Well, hello. One more thing before I move on. Just to kind of put a bow on the conversation here, because no, I don't think anybody thinks a Republican senator is going to come out of Minnesota, no matter what Nick Shirley uncovers in terms of fraud. There is a celebrity running for Senate over there, Michelle Tafoya, running for the GOP out there. And just for some perspective to kind of like show you exactly the kind of messaging that in Wisconsin, up until the new map started just a moment ago, would have still won, even though it's not popular. I want to show you. I pontificated yesterday. I said, I wonder what right wing media is saying right now about this war, about the affordability crisis, about what the cost of living is about. How are they justifying it to their listeners? Because you can only complain about Hillary Clinton and Hunter Biden for so long, trans people, whatever the situation is, before people realize, hey, yeah, I hate all those things, but what's the game plan here? I feel like there's really not much of a game plan. One right wing talk show host, Todd something. I apologize. I'm already blanking on it. He does right wing radio up in Minneapolis. He pulled off. He was interviewing Michelle Tafoya and talking about what people are seeing at the gas pump specifically. I'm going to play the answer. And in all honesty, I realize anybody who's a Democrat is just going to be like, yeah, this woman sucks. But like, I'm asking the right wing voters right now, like, is this a message that you think would win in any objective area? Forget gerrymandered stuff. Hell, Illinois is a very safe liberal bastion, and they just okayed one of the largest data centers on the planet that's going to use half as much electricity as the entire city of Chicago. Like, I'm not trying to pretend here that there aren't obvious blemishes everywhere, but I'm saying in a free and fair world where it's just may the best man or woman win. Tell me what you think about this political messaging, and what does it say about the people running that they feel comfortable saying this stuff?
What are some of the big issues on the minds of voters there in Minnesota?
Well, yeah, look, we've all been told that the word affordability is key, and it is. And right now, I would say, look, we had gas prices at a 5-year low, and we were really enjoying watching that. And now here we are in a conflict in the Middle East, which is bringing gas prices up again. I know it's frustrating, and I know it's hard for people. What I would say to them is we've lost some service members over there who have put their lives on the line to protect us, to protect the region, protect America's friends in the region. We can all, it used to be during the past wars, especially World War II, Americans got behind our servicemen and women, and we did little things to show our support for them. We collected metal, we recycled stuff, aluminum, so that we could, help in the war effort. I think right now, at least just kind of keeping a stiff upper lip. Maybe you take one less trip to Starbucks, and so that gas goes a little further until this thing is over and these gas prices come back down again. Let's just try to be patriots about this. Whether you agree with it or not, we're there, and we've got to support our men and women in uniform. That's a big one.
That actually makes my blood boil. I'm going to be honest with you. I think that's the dumbest answer I've ever heard in my life. And maybe it's because as a millennial, I get triggered by morons who act like Starbucks is the reason why there's an affordability crisis right now. There's a very high likelihood that that probably has something to do with it. But truly grasp what she was just telling people right there. Look, whether or not you agree with it or not, we're doing it. So suck it up and drink less coffee, and don't worry, you're going to be fine. Maybe that'll work if we're out of this by the end of April. You know what I mean? Because people do have short memories, and I would highly doubt, were we to get out of this by April, that people would still be thinking about it come November 2026. But I also know that you don't ask for $200 billion to fund an armed conflict if you're intending to get out of it in the next 40 days. And so that's the kind of messaging that persisted in Wisconsin for 15 years without really being able to be challenged on a district by district level. Statewide, as has been exemplified by the last 2 gubernatorial races, as well as the last 3 Wisconsin Supreme Court races, on a statewide perspective, it seems as though it's a little bit more difficult to rein in, other than than Donald Trump himself running against one of the most uniquely unliked candidates ever that was forced upon us. Outside of that one statewide election, Wisconsin has made its leanings fairly well known. Even though the races are close, they tend to skew in one direction. But when you hear answers like that, that's either spoken by somebody who doesn't really have a grasp on why people are struggling, or doesn't have or isn't particularly concerned about actually winning, and there's an ulterior motive for what they are doing here. I had one listener send me a video of a guy, it was a black guy, who made a video just recently where he was wearing a MAGA hat. Turns out he had been posting for 3 years, because it turns out that if you're a black guy and support MAGA talking points, even if you don't, you can make tens of thousands of dollars. And he made a video where he was dancing with all of his money and announced that it was all a grift, because we're so easily duped into this kind of stuff. I'll tell you right now, if we lived in a society where Greek people were the people that were ostracized, the people that were talked about like transgender communities or black communities were in the day, and I would be willing to turn on my mics and say, if Greeks would just learn to assimilate, maybe we wouldn't get so much hate. There would be an avenue for me to make so much money. And I think that has to come out of it as well. But the idea that Michelle Tafoya would go on to a radio program, be like, look, are you patriots or not? Pay more for gas for the war that nobody asked for and no one can explain why we're doing it. Like, I hope that doesn't win. And then conversely, there is fraud in Minnesota. There's problems in Minnesota that a good candidate could bring up and talk about in a way that actually matters. But if the choices are a couple $100 million in fraud, but also voting to send $200 billion to Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, or a couple hundred, just let the fraud continue on, but at least you have somebody that's going to talk about the war in a meaningful way, I'll tell you what I'll sign up for 10 out of 10 times. And I would assume the majority of Americans would as well, based on the polling data that's out there. We have our first caller of the day. Anybody else wants to chime in? 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, good morning, Ben.
Yeah, what's up, man?
Well, first of all, I think it's funny how she was lumping in being patriotic to supporting the troops. I think,
yeah,
I like to believe that most Americans always support the troops. It's the government and the government actions that people don't support.
Right.
The troops are pawns for the government.
Yes.
So, I thought that was funny. And, and one, if you don't go to Starbucks one time, so you're not going to spend $14 when it costs $55 to fill up your gas tank.
Yeah.
You're still going to pay $40-some.
Right.
I don't know.
And then
silly. But,
do you go get coffee, Ben? Do you go and get coffee before you start your day?
No, I do not drink coffee.
No. Neither do I. I've never gone to Starbucks in my life. I think that's probably my biggest pet peeve with it. Is it's like, okay, so that's not an option for me. So what's option 2? But go on. I interrupted you. Continue on.
So, well, another interesting thing that, like in the first Trump term, I'm sure you can remember that a lot of Democrats were beating their chest over, he has access to the nuclear codes.
Sure.
He's unhinged. He's unfit. He could hit that nuke button anytime. And this was when there wasn't really a war,
yes,
per se, like now. Now there is one. We are bombing Iran, and we went and got Maduro, and we are striking other countries, and nobody's talking about it.
Yeah,
like the Democrats are talking about it when there was nothing going on. Now they're not talking about it, to my point of the uniparty.
And I also, Ben, to take it even a step further, I think they have a little bit of a boy who cried wolf thing, because I think this second term has been more exactly what you said. The rhetoric coming from the Democratic Party in the first term actually matches this term better. But if they come out and say the same stuff they were saying 6 years ago, it's gonna be like, well, wait a minute, you said this last time, and there really wasn't anything that actually ended up happening in regards to this. I think you're exactly right. And to this day, Ben, I mean, we're pushing, we just hit 3 weeks of this war here. I still, outside of the usual suspects like Bernie Sanders and maybe a handful of others, I really can't find any Democrats condemning what's taking place. They're just mad that certain rules and decorum weren't followed. And I do believe, even if this persists for 3 more years, I'm not convinced a Democratic president would try and get us out of this. I genuinely think that this is the ultimate agenda, that the 80% or so of the people in Senate and Congress actually want to see happen.
Well, and I said to you during the election time that it seemed like the Democrats wanted Trump to win the election.
I swear to God, yes, I'm right there with you.
Yeah. So, and I still stand by that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, Ben. I'm right. I couldn't agree more. It really did feel, and it's interesting because I do another podcast that's very alarmist about Trump not allowing the elections to happen, which I do not necessarily buy into. I'm going to be honest. And I had to bite my tongue because they were like, it really feels like he's trying to lose this election. And the only reason that he would be doing that is if there weren't going to be an election. And I had to bite my tongue. I'm like, well, if that's the case, then I'm surprised Democrats didn't try and steal it in 2024, because that felt like an honest to God effort to not win the election. What's Cynthia saying here? I see what you say. I'm going to get into that, Cynthia. I'm not going to read your comment yet about Pete Hegseth because I have the audio for that. But yeah, Brian says Ben is correct. Where is Congress in the House? David says, fun fact, I start every morning with a cup of coffee. Mine costs 27 cents on my Keurig. Just saying. Exactly. And I've heard coffee prices have gone up by like 127% as well. Again, I am no mere mortal. My day does not start on coffee. My day starts on the thrill of bringing the people of the Fox Valley and of the Political Voices Network community and my new YouTube stream at Ben Cominos the news of the day. I do not need the caffeine hit to get my day rolling, but I'm no mortal like a lot of people listening to me right now. But it does drive me up a wall when you hear people use that kind of rhetoric. And I think, Ben, I've got no notes to add to Ben. KG brings up the idea of patriotism is good, mindless jingoism is bad. I'll take you a step further, and this might come across as insulting, but I think the problem with jingoism is that the more jingoistic a person is, the less likely they are to be able to define it. And I think that's probably the problem with extreme jingoism, is the moment. And I said it 2 days ago. Ben served in the war on terror, so he saw this stuff firsthand. He joined a cause because when you're young, when you're brought up, when you join the armed forces, you're told you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then all of a sudden you realize certain people in the troops in the armed forces are defending oil fields or whatever the situation is, or it's a war for resources. Some people buy into it, other people turn away from it and begin to question why it is that they found themselves in that position, and it's on a person by person basis. All I can do is speculate about this kind of stuff and highlight the historical elements and the parallels between what we see today compared to other eras. But it does feel like there's more and more people waking up to it. And as Cynthia highlights, there's one incredibly ironic comment that comes from our DEI defense secretary that I think you guys will want to hear, but we'll do another call first. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Morning, Ben.
Yeah, what's up, Dave?
I would really appreciate, like, the cable stations, when they do an interview like Haley does on her program, ask the congressman or somebody, what's your background? Where'd you come from? How'd you get to that job? They could even just do it with a chyron or something, They don't have to necessarily verbally do it all the time, but I want to know where these people come from. After all, Reagan was actually an actor, right?
Sure.
Essentially, Trump was an actor. Our Congressman Tony Weed, I think, basically owned gas stations. I mean, where'd you come from? They're giving them too much deference. They give them that title of senator or congressman, and it makes them, above everybody else. What was your background? Mr. Mullen was a plumber.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of, because media people are the same way. I worked with a guy back in Pittsburgh who would try to portray himself as knowing everything all the time. Very professional dude, very good at what he did, but he's just a guy. You know what I mean? He didn't have a PhD. He wasn't an expert in anything. He just would read occasionally, and that's why I wear on my sleeve, like, look, I'm a guy with an internet connection and some basic deductive reasoning, and I bring you guys my thoughts on the news of the day. I think it's a matter of so many people using these different pillars, whether it's the media or social media or politics, to kind of dress themselves up. And as we gain more constant access to these individuals, I think the more human they're ultimately ending up becoming. I don't think FDR or Herbert Hoover or any of the presidents from back then were any better or worse than the ones of today. It's just today, whenever they think something stupid, they can hop on Twitter and just go out and say it. Now, maybe Trump might say some uniquely stupid stuff. That I'm not going to take away from that. But I do think the constant access, it's the same thing with athletes. Are the athletes more or less well-behaved than they were in the 70s? Probably the same. But now there's cameras everywhere, so we see when they act like idiots. And it's just like that kind of thing, you know? But I do get the point that you're making there for sure.
Yeah. Well, even the host. I mean, Joe Rogan was a comedian. Now so many... He was on Fox at one time doing, like, Kimmel was doing this show called Mad Men or something like
the
that.
Man Show?
The Man Show. Man Show.
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah.
Rush Limbaugh was just a local. He worked support for one of the football teams, and beyond that, he always was just a radio jock.
Oh, for
That's
sure.
all he ever did.
For sure. Sean Hannity was a painter before he ended up becoming what he was. Not like an artistic painter, like he painted homes. It's
House painter.
Yeah, it's uncanny how these people, and I appreciate the call, Dave. But yeah, exactly. I would totally agree with that sentiment. Trust me, anybody with any capacity for self-reflection that finds themselves in the position that I am in will question a lot of things about life. I'm going to be honest. You guys have kind of slowly, over the course of 3.5 years, watched me become more and more disillusioned with the media. And as I oftentimes say to you guys, I could find you an economist to prove whatever point you want to see made. I believe in the corporate greed angle of it, and I can find economists that are going to back that claim up. I can also find you economists that are going to tell you that it's because we pumped too much money into government programs. No matter what the situation is, I can find you an expert that's going to back those claims up. And to one more point, because I see DSL saying the vast majority of people in politics come from privileged backgrounds or three-letter agencies. First of all, yes. Secondly, though, and I think what's important to bring home, and I'm not telling you have to agree with this individual, but I think it's the principle that matters. When Tim Walz was selected as the vice presidential candidate for the Kamala Harris campaign, we learned about his personal life. And he shared a story about how in his earlier days, when he was just starting his family, I think he got laid off or something happened. I don't know what the specifics were. I can't remember if he owned a business or if he worked somewhere else, but something happened, whether it was the 2008 crisis or whatever it was, where he lost his income and came very, very close to within days of losing his home. And when I heard that story, I was like, man, it really would be nice to have somebody that understands exactly what it's like to be on your last dollars when you're trying to figure out how to pay rent. But then other people heard that story and said, why would I want a guy that almost lost his own home as the second in command at the White House? And so, like, we say we want the everyman. We say we don't want any more millionaires. We say we want average individuals running for office. And then when that comes about, we find a reason to say that we don't want it. AOC, for better or worse, there were videos of her riding the subway after a bartending shift to go to a debate, and you would see her, I remember very vividly, you'd see her taking the shoes for Cruz off and putting high heels on so that she could go look more classy. Whether or not you agree or disagree with her politics, there is no doubt that she understands what it means to work for tips, that she knows what it means to have to find a way to make sure that you can pay rent. to know what it means to have $10 in your bank account and know that you have between 36 and 50 hours before you're going to get your next paycheck, and you have to figure out how you're going to stretch that $10 until then. That's a real Ben Comino story from my early 20s, by the way. You want to believe that the people running for office can actually relate to that stuff, but then when they share that that's where they came from, they say, well, why would we want someone like you making important decisions? If we actually mean this stuff, then we have to actually mean it when we're talking about it. And I think Dave brings up a valid point, as does DSL there. They kind of tangented me off of the whole Japan thing, which we're going to have to go to break, and we'll finish the hour with that conversation there. But I think it's an important distinction to make here, that if that's what we're actually looking for, then I think we have to consider that in conjunction with political policy. 73 out of 100 members of the Senate are millionaires. If you're wondering why it seems like so much of the policy benefits millionaires, look no further. If you want that to change, then we're going to need more normal people in these kind of positions. But with that normalness comes baggage, comes questionable social media comments from your early 20s, like Graham Plattner's going through right now. Comes the economic strife that comes with being a millennial, graduating into a recession, only to find out that a decade later there's going to be a pandemic coming your way right when you start to get your footing. There's going to need to be some kind of understanding of that if we're going to pull through, if we're going to actually shift the millionaire concentration in our House and in our Senate. But with that, we're going to squeeze one quick break in here, though. We are going to put a bow on this conversation. We'll at least start with Japan. I've got so much more to get into here as well. We'll keep it rolling, though. Stay right where you are. Outside the Box, Ben Comino's WHBY and Political Voices Network. So Tina messaged me during the break. She says, instead, we want a businessman who bankrupts businesses. WTH. Like, just to drive a point home, about what I was about that last conversation. And to your point here, Tina, that's the exact same thing, though. So allow me to paint you a perspective. You hear that, and you hear he bankrupts businesses, he's a failure, he's going to bankrupt the country. People that support him say he bankrupts businesses, he took his shots, he failed, and then he kept going. You and I both know he was born on third base. He inherited, he was given $1 million loan to start adulthood. He inherited 9 figures after his dad died. He's not a self-made man story. I'm not breaking any news to you whatsoever. But just like the Tim Walz story, that story can also be told from two entirely different perspectives. Look, um, what if I had tried to get this career off the ground and it failed? You know what I mean? Like, I would have rather tried to do this and not had any success than always be wondering what would have happened uh um had I not. And then Tina follows up saying, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not okay for Trump or Tim, but it's okay for Trump. And that kind of leans into a bigger point, though, that I was making earlier in the week, saying we find a way to justify it to ourselves. We all basically are single issue voters. That issue can change. It could be abortion. It could be Mexicans. It could be the transes. It could be war. It could be tax the rich. It could be whatever it is. And then we just find a way to make justifications outside of whatever that is. In 2008, Democrats loved a new politician, and Republicans said, we need John McCain because he's been there. Then in 2016, Republicans loved new politicians, and Democrats said, we need Hillary Clinton because she's been there. We all kind of construe our personalities to fit, and I think it would be better if we were all just honest about what we were actually voting for. But the people voting for the trans thing or whatever the situation is know that they would be embarrassed if they had to say that out loud. So they find whatever justification they can find to allow themselves to vote for the candidate that's going to do the thing that they would do. It's why I always tried to avoid being ageist, because I know he's not going to run. But if a 174-year-old Bernie Sanders came out and said, we're going to jack up the taxes on 978 billionaires, I'd be like, oh, good. Someone that means business, which is why you never heard me comment on Joe Biden's age, because I try to find the real issues to talk about here. With that, we never got to what I wanted to talk about, but thankfully I have a whole other hour. So we'll do that on the other side. Download the HBY app, subscribe to my YouTube channel. We'll be back on the other side of the news, outside the box. All right, we're back. Ben Comino's Outside the Box. WHBY Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, like there was a rundown for this show. I swear to God, there was. We started off talking about the high number of Wisconsin GOP state Senate and Assembly members who are announcing that they're not interested in running for re-election. And I just can't help but notice that that happens to coincide with their first time having to run on maps that have not been gerrymandered. And then we were going to get into a conversation about Donald Trump and the way he's been treating our Japanese allies with a pretty outlandish statement about Pearl Harbor. But we got kind of sidetracked into a conversation about the backgrounds of members of the media as well as our political officials in trying to find a way to kind of keep that information in front of us there. So I'm going to speed round all of the text messages that have piled up, and then I do want to get into some things that are actually pretty breaking news, which, is oftentimes a touch and go process for me, but we'll try. Okay, Jerry says Reagan had a lot of political experience before he ran for president. He was president of the Screen Actors Guild and then governor of California for 8 years, very famously talking about the educated electorate is going to be the downfall of the Republican Party. I'm pretty sure. I'm paraphrasing that quote, but I do know that fact. Mickey says she sent me an email last night about a Montana guy running as a progressive. It was in an interview of Takeout with Major Garrett. I'm not sure. I didn't get a chance to watch it. I'll have to. And it says she was listening outside the box. So I'll have to give it a listen. All right. Larry says Donald Trump was bailed out 7 times in 14 years. Every 2 years, the government needs to stop bailing out our businesses because when they do, the worker has to pay for it through inflation. Fair point there. All right, we've got plenty of messages here as well. I'm sorry, I just got to keep it rolling here, guys. But I do want to say it just came down the pipeline. Somebody came in the PJ from WSCO came in the studio to confirm it with me, and I just did a quick search. Looks like Deadline is reporting it along with a handful of others, but CBS Radio is being dissolved after nearly 100 years. You know, I've been making comments about this since Barry Weiss took over CBS Radio. I've been calling it CBS Newsmax on the show. You can tell there's been a lot of changes. They're laying off 6% of their workforce, which amounts to about 60 people getting laid off from that operation. No, this is quite literally breaking, like not even 10 minutes old news yet. No idea what's going to be going on in terms of a programming perspective for WHBY. I am flying by the seat of my pants on this one right now, but that just was announced within the last 10 minutes. Almost 100 years old, Barry Weiss has announced that it's going the way of the dodo here. You know, blah, 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 hardest decision to make, so on and so forth. I'll be honest, I've been saying it since she was given the reins, but I never would have guessed that giving a woman who had a blog with a couple of followers on it, but a very, very staunch support for Israel, and against the scourge of wokeness. I never would have thought that giving somebody a major news network, control of a major news network like that, would result in such sweeping negative changes and job losses so quickly. Yet here we are. I don't think anybody could have seen that coming except for literally anybody. But while we're there, this is just going to be the ADD show, and that's absolutely fine. We will get to Pete Hegseth, I promise. I would like to put the myth to bed that all of these wealthy people are job creators, and that's why we can't tax them into oblivion. David Ellison is also part of the CBS move here as well, which I think should be highlighted. But moreover, it is March. It is March 20th. UPS has laid off 30,000 people. Amazon has laid off 16,000 people. Intel has laid off 15,000 people. Volkswagen has laid off 50,000 people. Meta has laid off 16,000 people. Oracle has laid off 30,000 people. Citigroup has laid off 20,000 people. Now, those companies that I mentioned, some of them are union, some of them are not. Some of them have seen wage increases. Some of them have not. Some of them pay handsome wages already and really didn't need to see any kind of increase. Some do not. But if there's one thing that is in common here, it's that these layoffs are coming, and they are coming at a record pace that we have never seen before, somewhat brought about by AI. But then when you look at the metrics talked about with AI and the economic growth as a result of implementing AI and the job satisfaction as a result of AI, you're going to struggle to see anybody actually condoning these layoffs as they are happening. So the difference being, when the 2008 layoffs happened, it sucked for the people that were laid off. And I'm not going to minimize that for a second, but the jobs still existed. They were filled by younger people that were willing to take smaller salaries in the name of making sure that the CEOs and the owners were able to take home a larger percentage of the profit. But the jobs still existed. Those jobs aren't coming back this time around. These people are getting laid off. The record profits are still happening, and there's been no real push in order to try and fix this. Jeff Bezos has begun the process of raising $100 billion so that he could buy manufacturing companies and then use AI and machinery to automate them. He's going on his $500 million yacht, going to a $50 million wedding, using $100 billion to buy companies with no intention other than eliminating the jobs. And we're going to sit here and say that we can't tax that guy. If I turned on my microphone a week ago before this jag decided to do this and said, we should just tax Jeff Bezos $100 billion right now, we should take it and apply it to a system that is designed to keep people afloat, people would turn around and say, Ben, how would this guy build 40,000 more Amazon warehouses and employ in all the losers that can't figure out how to get jobs somewhere else? Meanwhile, he's been laying off record numbers of employees. He's already automated 40% of Amazon as we speak, while using every dollar he can to lobby against any kind of increase to the minimum wage. And now he is attacking other industries. He's doing exactly what Amazon did for the last 20 years, attacking the mom and pop shops until they go out of business, and then being the only game in town. And we are now seeing that happen on the manufacturing side. DSL just said to me a couple days ago, this is why you need to learn a skill and make sure you can do X, Y, and Z, because it's going to be the white collar jobs that go first. Waka Waka, it looks like there isn't a safe place to land when you really step back and look at what's going on here. And CBS Newsmax is just the latest example of that happening. I have gone on multiple rants about how local media has been hamstrung time and time again. In the early 2000s, the radio station that I worked at in Pittsburgh had reporters stationed in the Middle East to report on the Middle East. We had one reporter whose job it was just to stay at City Hall, and anytime the people in the Assembly or the Senate or whomever tried to sneak something past the public, there was a man, and I like technically a woman, but let's be real, look at the era, it was probably a man. There was a guy who was ready to report on it. So when you find out through the grapevine after they've already voted, state Senate votes unanimously to give raises to every member in the state Senate, there's afterthought outrage, but nobody can really do anything about it beforehand. You can't raise the picket, the what do you call it, the torches and the pickets outside before the fact, because now every local operation only has one person doing the reporting. There's a groundbreaking at a new hospital today on the same day that they're trying to vote to give themselves a raise. Well, pick and choose which one of them is going to make it into the newscast. And now we're seeing it happen on the national level. And you know what's super interesting, and I can give you guys some insight into this, is you watch Fox, you watch MSNBC, you watch CNN, and they used to have producers and an army of reporters and all this access to insight that people like me never could get, right? They had the insiders, they had the funding, they could do this stuff. And so people like me were always beholden to be like, okay, I guess we'll run with what these guys are saying, but we're going to look at it through a specific prism because I don't trust anything coming from these people. When I watch those news networks now, I can tell they're scrolling Twitter to find their talking points, because I see those talking points on Twitter. And if you're not good at thinking for yourself, the people that try to use AI in every element of their life are technically the people who are doing the news on our national networks. They're not into actually trying to provide insight into why things are collapsing. They just want to make their $1 million salaries for as little effort as possible. It's why the whole AI concept, as a creative person, I struggle to grapple with. When people are excited about it, I just struggle getting excited about it, because the act of putting together my own show is where a lot of my enjoyment out of this industry comes from. And you see these people, I understand it's a business, but you know what? Being informed shouldn't be a business. I'm not saying it should be state funded, because I understand the drawbacks to that as well. But there has to be a way to make this work where you're not worried about getting your funding cut by some president who calls anything fake news that highlights exactly how bad of a job he's doing right now, while at the same time not being beholden to endorsements. There have been people that asked if I want them to endorse on the show, that if you really know me, you can probably guess where those companies are. And I said no, because I don't want to be beholden to a certain way of thinking, because eventually I'm going to say something that angers you. Right now, MAGA kind of hates this show. Flash forward to when we're dealing with President Newsom, and something tells me MAGA is going to be super on board with this show again. And I can ride those tides out as long as I'm not beholden to government funding and people are buying into the show. But this is bad news. And I think CBS News has sucked since Barry Weiss has taken over. They're bad from a production standpoint. I think the news that they cover is bad. I think it's all garbage. I don't think it's particularly impressive. It doesn't mean that they don't serve a purpose, and it doesn't mean that under new leadership they could actually be relevant again. And now we'll never know because of this decision here, and that sucks. And that is my live reaction to finding out 20 minutes ago, the announcement, the last day, I believe, I want to make sure I get the date right. May 22nd is when it's going to be shutting down. So that is a 2-month turnaround. Just absolute nonsense. And Chuck Norris died. Oh my God. Guys, it's Friday. Can we get a little bit of good news here? 86 years old. We will miss you, Chuck. Oh God. All right. Reset. What time is it? Here's the game plan. We're coming back. We're doing Pete Hegseth. I have some quotes from Pete Hegseth. I have some people in the YouTube chat asking about certain stories that I wasn't going to get into, but I will get into it due to the request. I'm also going to play one comment that I swear to God has to be trolling, because if it's not trolling, he really is the DEI defense secretary. And I am going to if you haven't heard about the comment about where the theocratic nation of Iran invests their money, and that's why their citizens are mad. If you haven't heard this quote yet, buckle up, because your head might just explode on a Friday. We'll be back. Short break here. We'll be back very quickly. Outside the Box, WHBY. You know, Chuck Norris harkens back to a more fun time period in the internet sphere. If you ask me, if you want to see what the internet was like 15 years ago, go look up Chuck Norris jokes, and that's what used to be happening on Twitter. Justin, regular texter, also followed up to let me know that it happened as well, and I immediately typed back to him and said, "I heard Death had a near Chuck experience," and like, I'll tell you right now, every millennial that just heard me made that joke is cracking up right now because like that's what we used to do with each other when, like just for fun, for no reason, not even to go viral, not to get more attention on us, just because we thought it was funny. And it's strange. That's a strange one. And you guys know I'm not particularly like, yeah, he's 86 years old. That's a solid life. Anytime someone dies in their 80s, no offense to anybody in their 80s, but when you have a sick parent growing up and they end up losing their life right when they turn 50, when you hear somebody dies at 86, you're like, solid life. But that's a strange one, just because even though I never really watched Walker Texas Ranger or really enjoyed any, like, it's not like I really watched Chuck Norris movies. I most certainly told Chuck Norris jokes my entire life. But that's a strange one. He was a legend for sure. But all right, let's get into it here. Look, I know I said I've been talking about it the whole time. The long and short of it is, Donald Trump made a joke about Pearl Harbor. And like, what's funny is when you're a millennial dude who grew up in the edgelord era of comedy, like off the top of my head, I can remember 2 episodes of South Park that did Pearl Harbor jokes for the entire joke. And one episode of South Park where they made a joke about dropping the bombs. And it's not funny, but it's also South Park, and you just kind of are used to it. A president should not be doing South Park jokes. But like, also, I also know when I grew up. And so like I struggle with being the joke police. However, when you are starting a war that is already involving multiple nations in it, when it is an escalating gas crisis, when you are asking people to help you open up the Strait of Hormuz, when you are depending on the people that you have been ridiculing for the last however many years to all of a sudden come to your back and you're going to make a joke about Pearl Harbor. If you guys didn't hear, I'm not going to play the audio of it, but I watched it with the Japanese interpreter sound on. And if you listen to it with that interpreter sound on, the dialogue keeps happening, but the interpreters are sitting there in stunned silence because they can't believe what they just heard come out of a president's mouth. And to me, the silence says more than anything any elected official could possibly say. And again, I'm not a pearl clutcher. Like, I don't care about jokes. But I think there comes a time when the reality of the situation needs to set in. And as I kind of started the show with here, is if you think it's funny, that's fine. But just when I just slam ice into the pavement, you better, if you're not laughing along, you better be piping down and not saying anything to management going forward, because clearly you have made it known that you are comfortable with these kind of jokes now and you're going to need to grow up. It's that simple. Now, that's all I have to say about that. Pete Hegseth was doing a press conference, and I want to start here, and then I will get to Jamie's comment about that she asked me about, because I realized some people in the YouTube chat line didn't even know what was going on. But I want to start here because if this were trolling, this is the best trolling that I've ever seen in my life. But I really don't want my DEI defense secretary trolling me. I want them actually being straightforward with us. He was talking about the type of country that Iran is. And I'm not even going to set it up any more than that. If you know me, if you've heard this show one time ever, you already know how I'm going to feel about this. Listen to what he had to say and describe why the citizens of Iran took to the streets to protest, and tell me if you don't hear another nation in this description.
To that point on capabilities, Iran is an energy-rich country, could be, should be. Instead, like so many other places driven by a radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people. That's why you had millions of Iranians protesting, because they felt like their quality of life didn't match what it could be or should be.
I'm sorry, Pete. What was that?
Places driven by a radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people. That's why you had millions of Iranians protesting, so many other places driven by radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people. That's why you had millions of Iranians protesting.
Okay. So they were investing in their military budget instead of investing in the people. You're telling me that instead of investing in universal college, which Iran has, you're telling me that instead of investing in universal health care, which Iran has, instead of investing in their public schools, which are adequately funded, instead of investing in their child care, elder care, anything to benefit the people, they were investing in their weapons. They were investing in their weapons, you don't say. How much was the Pentagon asking for again? $200 billion. Just to be clear, the fiscal hawk conservatives decided that $60 billion to expand Obamacare subsidies while trying to figure out a new plan was too expensive while they're about to funnel $200 billion into the military-industrial complex. Is that what he's trying to say? Is that what you were trying to say there, Pete? What was that?
You know, Iran's an energy-rich country, could be, should be. Instead, like so many other places driven by radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people. That's why you had millions of Iranians protesting, because they felt like their condition quality of life didn't match what it could be or should be, because they felt like their condition quality of life didn't match what it could be or should be, because they felt like their condition quality of life didn't match what it could be or should be.
You don't say. You don't bleeping say. Oh my God, this guy's a moron. This guy is a moron. He's a what moron. Nobody should take this clown seriously. Moron. Stupid. Moron. I don't know if it was trolling or not. Congratulations, you got a triggered leftist. You are a moron, Pete. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have not a leg to stand on. You are in that position because it's a DEI position and we needed more stupid what boys in the Defense Department, and you managed to get a position there, you moron. Waka waka MAGA. Not only is this guy a moron, but he is a liar too. And this is to answer a statement from about a soldier who lost his life last week. We watched armed services members lose their lives. I believe the number is at 14 at this point. And when they lost their lives, this lying white boy decided to say that he spoke to the parents of the fallen soldier, and they told him, finish the job. Those parents came out yesterday and said, no, we absolutely the bleep did not. He is making that up. Picture that story. Like, I feel like it's cliche to say it at this point, but that story would absolutely sink in administration 15 years ago. Soldiers died for a pointless war caused by our president. And then his defense secretary, his DEI defense secretary, turned around and made up what the parents said to them. So it sounded like it was some kind of righteous endeavor to continue this pointless war that's over 70% of the population doesn't want to see happening. I don't understand how these morons still have support. I mean, I do get it. A cultist is going to cultist. I watched Blue MAGA exist, and I will say, I can say with a full throat, the most obnoxious cult is the cult that is in power. When Blue MAGA was in power, pretending that Bidenomics was working, it was obnoxious because I knew absolutely to the contrary what was going on. But the idea that people can support these morons blows my mind. And I see Jimmy trying to pull some kind of MAGA crap. Real quick, Jimmy, abortion access. Type to me how you feel about it, and then we'll talk about women's rights in Iran, okay? I want to hear what you think about women's rights in America. Because the DEI defense secretary, the stupid what boy, has got a preacher marching around with him that says women shouldn't be able to vote, and nobody's condemning him. So let me know your thoughts on that, Jimmy, and then we'll get into any of the dumb things you want to say about Iran, okay? This man should not be taken seriously. And I think it stings extra. Like, I'm almost punched out at this point. It's kind of like when the Democratic Party anointed Kamala Harris. It took me 10 shows. It took me 10 shows of screaming into the mic and just mother hubbing the Democratic Party, saying this is because they know that people want progressive leadership and they're blocking it from happening. And after 2 weeks, I finally had punched myself out. I was like Bruce Willis at the end of Sin City, punching that yellow-faced dude, if you guys ever seen the movie, and eventually he's just punching the concrete at that point. I feel like every day I wake up and I feel like I'm getting to that point with the Iran war. And then eventually someone from this DEI Defense Department comes and says or does something so stupid that it's like it's a new war all over again to me.
You know, Iran's an energy rich country, could be, should be.
Moron.
Instead, like so many other places driven by a radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people.
Moron.
That's why you had millions of Iranians protesting, because they felt like their condition quality of life didn't match what it could be or should be.
Stupid moron. Nobody take this guy seriously. The guy has my job. Pretend I'm telling you this about the Defense Department and tell me how safe you feel about these decisions right now. This guy is a jackass. And this administration is not doing anything for the American public. I called it when Democrats were in office. I said, I do not want our money going to Ukraine. By the way, since February of 2022, $175 billion have gone to Ukraine. Donald Trump is asking for $200 billion right now for Iran. So just for some perspective on things here. But beyond that, I said, if MAGA were to take the reins and the options are send our tax dollars to Ukraine to help them defend themselves against Russia, or send our tax dollars to Jeffy B and the Nazi saluting moron in the name of becoming trillionaires and automating their workshops, I'd rather give the money to Ukraine. And it turns out that in my wildest dreams, I did not believe exactly how little the MAGA movement was actually going to do for America in what is alleged to be an America First movement. And then to have the audacity, the balls, to get on the air and say, the reason the people in Iran are protesting is because they are investing in their defense systems instead of investing in their people. And then taking to the microphone to lie about what the parents of a fallen soldier have done, and have the alleged patriots, the real American patriots of MAGA, stay silent. Do not expect me to take you seriously when Democrats whoop your ass in 2026 and again in 2028, and they're funding Mexicans coming into this country in order to do transgender surgeries for people in the military. Do not expect me to take your complaints seriously, because you have not a serious bone in your body. It is laughable that somebody would try and do this and say this. And I can't help but feel, because Pete Hegseth is a moron. He's a stupid moron. He is a dumb, stupid, mother-hubbing moron. Trust me. But I think he knows what he's saying when he says that. I think he's testing exactly how much MAGA will focus. Jimmy snapped to attention, clapping like the trained seal that he is. What about Iran's women? What about Iran's women? We need to do this war for Iran's women. Because he knows he can say this stuff with not an ounce of irony in his voice. And people like Jimmy won't hear it. He knows that MAGA won't hear it. And that's fine. Choose not to hear it. But Waka Waka MAGA, the guy with the microphone, is going to make fun of the people that act like they don't hear it. Invest in the people. You just compared us to the theocratic nation that is Iran. And guess what? If little Petey there had it his way, the 10 Commandments would be in every school. We'd be teaching creationism instead of evolutionism. If Pete and his boys had it his way, we would be that theocratic nation. It's just that we actually have rules to prevent it. And trust me, people like Pete are trying to find ways to circumvent it because Jimmy's nervous they're coming to trans as kids. David says you should copyright your idiot white boy. Yeah, I spell it H in parentheses WHITEBOI, in case you were wondering, is the appropriate way to spell it. Is Pittsburgh in the South? No. Although the last sales job I have did have us labeled as the Midwest, which I also don't agree with that either. But we're also not East Coast. That's why Pittsburgh's in this fun in that fun region there. You know what I mean? Like we really don't know what we are. I love that town. But I appreciate nevertheless. And Jerry says when Chuck Norris went swimming, he didn't get wet. The water got Chuck Norris. Damn right, Jerry. You get what I'm doing there. The segment started out fun. I needed a Chuck Norris joke to kind of start off because I knew I was going to pop off on this moron when it happened because they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. But nevertheless, Jimmy will defend it till he dies. We know he will. He's a cultist. That's fine. This isn't for him. This show is for the rest of us that are coming to grips with the reality of the situation here that we are struggling in. We're going to go to break. We're going to have a longer final segment here in the show than we normally do, which is kind of a nice change of pace, but I need to reset. I've got a lot more things that I still want to get into here before we wrap up the show, but I want to make sure that I get the ship right here, and I see that the YouTube chat line has been popping off, so I want to take some time to read along with that as well. Anybody wants to text, we got the text line 920-281-1150. We've also got the YouTube chat. I'll be honest, I haven't even looked at my emails today. Thankfully, nobody's tried to communicate via email, but that's also on the table as well. Still trying to balance all these different measures here to keep chatting with you guys. Doing my best. That's all I can say. We're going to go to a quick break here, and we'll be back for a final segment of the week before you guys can enjoy some pleasant Haley chat as well as March Madness. But we got to do one more segment of the real stuff before we get into it. I got one more thing that I'm a little heated about. Probably not as heated as that, though. And any other thoughts about our DEI defense secretary, the stupid white boy that Jimmy idolizes, let me know. 920-281-1150. 920-281-1150. We'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Waka waka, Jimmy.
Locations in Appleton, Oshkosh, and Green Bay, or virtually. Everyone has a legacy. Let's protect it together.
Listen, Wisconsin, we're not warm yet, but melting days and freezing nights mean water is on the move and your sump pump is about to get busy. Water damage is one of the top reasons homeowners file insurance claims, so do yourself a favor and avoid the headache altogether. Test your sump pump today by calling or texting Tim Roush and his team. You can just use that free text line I've been telling you about. They help keep your basement dry and protected. Head to timroushplumbing.com for that text line and more info. That's Roush Plumbing, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. We are celebrating the locally nominated women during Focus Fox Valley with Haley Tenpass in the month of August, leading into Women's Equality Day on August 26th. Nominate a woman who wows you now at WHBY.com. Looking for your choice, Jimmy.
Symptoms like irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue, or lightheadedness can come and go. But if it's AFib, the risk of stroke remains. If you have symptoms, contact a doctor. I'm so glad I did. Visit notimetowait.com. Sponsored by Bristol Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
Catch the CBS Tax Tips weekdays at 6:20 a.m., 12:20, and 4:20 p.m. on WHBY. Brought to you locally by Hailing and Associates in Neenah, an accounting firm dedicated to close personal attention, advanced training, and state-of-the-art tech. That's hailingandassociates.com. All right, I've been told I'm required by law to do one more segment. And it's fine. You know, I'm going to miss you guys these 2 days, so may as well get it in here. By the way, I was slacking on the YouTube chat here. So first of all, Jero Mani says Gen X think the Chuck Norris jokes are great too, and I appreciate that as well. Yes, I'm just looking at it through my own lens, but realistically, I believe there is a ubiquity to Chuck Norris jokes, which are very nice. And then Anna hit me up with Chuck Norris counted to infinity twice. When Chuck Norris does push-ups, he pushes the earth down, and the boogeyman checks his closet for Chuck Norris. And that's just a taste. That's just a smattering of what was available online before, everything sucks now. People enjoying that I love playing it over and over again. And then in response to Jimmy's lackluster effort to pretend to care about women's rights in the name of funding never-ending war and defending his dad president, Anna says, should women vote? How do you feel about the Heritage Foundation? How do you care about the SAVE Act? You can't admire taking away women's rights in our country and then condemn it in others, to which Larry followed up with, we have trouble keeping or sweeping our side of the street. The heat is 100% warranted. And yeah, I don't like getting, normally the last hour is a pretty lighthearted hour, because I tend to go a little off the rails. Well, that was the 9 o'clock hour of the show, but it tends to go a little bit off the rails. And I just, like I said, it's the blind patronage that I know. We all know people like Jimmy would not defend this decision had Kamala Harris made it. There's not ounce of being in me that believes there would be some kind of humanitarian streak in MAGA all of a sudden. Well, I'm anti-war, but I did hear that all these women are being mistreated in Iran. So, I mean, I guess we got to do what we got to do. That wouldn't be a conversation that happened. And we all know that. We all know that. I should just move on. But it's so stupid sometimes. It's just like the what boy, Pete Hegseth. What did you have to say about that, Pete? I'm sorry. Were you trying to say something? I couldn't hear you.
Iran's an energy rich country, could be, should be. Instead, like so many other places driven by a radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people. That's why you had millions of Iranians protesting, because they felt like their condition, quality of life didn't match what it could be or should be.
Moron. Stupid what moron. Oh my God. At least in good news, if anybody is sad about Chuck Norris's passing, Ethan has informed me that actually Chuck Norris had died 20 years ago. Death was just too scared to tell him. So apparently this has been older news than we all realize. So don't allow it to get you too far down here if you were starting to feel a little melancholy about the passing. It looks as though it's much older news than any of us was aware. So that we at least have that going for us. So. Well, this is a schizophrenic one today here, guys, but we're almost there. We're almost there. All right. We do not know what we will be talking about. There is no more confused point in my career than between 11:30 and noon when I am working on a promotion for what the Monday show is going to be about. Not having any idea of what's going to happen on a day-by-day basis. Because, let me say it this way, because it's something that I've been struggling with lately as well. It's a little bit more of a human moment here, but we as humans are on an information overload. And in a lot of ways, it is good. It is good that we have access to this kind of information because we need to know. And I oftentimes use Israel-Palestine as an example, a place where Jimmy, I'm sure, is very nervous about the way that the civilians in Gaza have been treated since October 7th. I'm never going to stop. You say dumb crap in the text line. They say quarterbacks have to have a short memory. My RAM goes forever. I'll be making jokes about this in 4 months. But I'd rather know what's happening in Gaza and be sad about it than be clueless about what's happening. And I genuinely do mean that. I'd rather know about the Strait of Hormuz. I'd rather know about Minneapolis, which, by the way, very quietly, ICE, like the Minnesota protesters won, by the way. It's very quiet. There's still some absolute trash happening in the detention centers. One of my shadow producers sent me some screenshots. I'm not going to have time to get to it today, but I'm going to work those in eventually of 7-year-olds writing notes about what it's like in those detention centers. But in terms of the masked Virgin Army murdering Americans in the streets, those days are gone. And Donald Trump is quietly saying behind closed doors that with Mark Wayne Mullen's approach to ICE, it needs to change because the political sentiment was so negative towards immigration enforcement that they can't continue behaving the way that they are. And I'm surprised that more liberals aren't gloating, and rightfully so. This is the one time that I would allow it. And I'd be like, no, dude, strut your stuff, because I'm thrilled at what Minnesota did, but being aware of all that stuff all the time can weigh on you very heavily. And I think it changes our brain chemistry in a way that I think we're not even aware of. And the Chuck Norris thing kind of highlights the overarching point that I was intending to make anyways, because I was chatting with a cohort of mine off the air after I got off the air yesterday, I should say. And he was saying, people are looking for some bygone era of the internet that I just don't know ever existed. I just think there's more of X, Y, and Z thrust in our face. And I was like, I don't know. And I'm not the authority on this because I very famously didn't do social media for about a dozen years and only kind of started doing it once I took this job. But I do know from group chats and things that were sent to me that It really did used to be a more fun place. And I think I'm just kind of doing a PSA right now to kind of remind people that it is important to stay informed and it is important to know what's going on, whether it's in your backyard, around the country, or around the world, while also still acknowledging that you are only one person. And there's only so much that you can do. Not to say ignore it, not to say give up on it, not to say don't organize, don't strive to make a move, don't strive to make life better, but also acknowledging what your limitations are. I've been doing this job for not long at all, but also long enough that I can't remember what I used to do to vent when I was getting frustrated. To be perfectly frank, Trump 1.0 wasn't nearly as infuriating as Trump 2.0, and I hadn't seen the Democratic Party kind of turn heel and pretend that the economy was doing just fine under the Biden years. But I don't know what I'd be doing if I didn't have this avenue, this venue, this community with so many of you guys taking part in the program every single day. I don't know what to expect. Like, I don't know what I would do. And as Larry points out, all the political news comes out after 10 p.m. on Fridays. That's a very good point as well. It's a very strange sensation, and it's my job to follow along, and I've found ways to cope with it. I have circles of friends, I have avenues, I have things like that. But I am noticing online just the way people carry themselves, and I've been doing better. I've been trying really hard not to call people names as long as they don't get dumb. Obviously, there's some, there's people that get out of pocket, and you got to do what you need to do to put things right back in the place that they need to be. But what I do know is this. We as a nation can right this ship, but it has to be a serious effort. I posted something yesterday on my TikTok talking about how there's more disaffection with what Donald Trump is and what the MAGA movement is than ever before. But if you think for a single second that those kind of people are going to turn around and vote for Gavin Newsom, I have terrible news for you. It's a matter of working from the bottom up and actually meaning what we say. If you were upset that money was going overseas to Ukraine, but you're also championing cuts to SNAP and Medicaid, what exactly do you want to see happen with that money? If you were in favor of defending the Ukrainians, but also in favor of defending Israel in the eyes of what was going on with Gaza, how do you reconcile those points? Working on your own circle and then branching outward is the best you can do. It's one of the first segments I ever did with you guys. My life philosophy is I don't know what the meaning of life is. This is the Ben Comino's meaning of life. We were put on this earth to make lives better, first and foremost for ourselves, which sounds selfish, but it's realistic. I oftentimes state when people try and gotcha me with owning a duplex, I say, well, radio only pays so much. And if you're going to be able to get a message out there and do a program like the one I do, you can't do it from the gutter. Your health, mental well-being, fiscal well-being have to be in order before you're going to find yourself in a position to be able to take care of others. But once you are in that position, you shouldn't be that bald bastard Jeff Bezos making $250 billion, buying manufacturing plants, and then automating them. Why do you need more money, and why does it require you eliminating jobs to do it? It shouldn't. There's something broken in people that they would choose to do that, and more importantly, that they would choose to support it. That they would try and paint me as the radical, say, you know what? Tell the government to take $100 billion from Jeff if that's how he's going to do it, and use it to fund SNAP benefits for the next 20 years. Use it to fund those Obamacare subsidies that absolutely need to be reformed, but for the next 3 years, while the adults in the room try and figure out a way to do it. I see for governor right now, Tom Tiffany talking about trans people and property taxes. I see the Democratic side talking about healthcare access, getting into a home, doing the things that are necessary. Explain to me why that isn't on everybody's mind all the time. Unless, of course, you already own the home. Your circle's fine, but you don't care that other people's circles aren't, even though the systems that are in place helped you get there that don't exist anymore. It's probably going to be a rough weekend. I feel it in my bones, just the way this week's ending in terms of foreign policy and national news. And there's March Madness. There's distractions going on. I was going to go to the SEO guys, but I kind of hurt myself a couple days ago, and I might lay low for the next couple of days. We'll see what happens. But try and disconnect and try and stay positive. And if you find yourself in a position to do so, be that positive force. And we'll be back on Monday, and then we can get back into the negative. I got to get out of here. Haley's up next with Rob Zimmer. Download the app. Follow me on YouTube. Check it out on Political Voices Network in just a little bit, and we'll be back on Monday to do it all over again. You're listening to Outside the Box here on WHBY and Political Voices.